Just before dawn, the lead guided missile cruiser holds a measured course at the western mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. The sea looks flat, but every console inside Combat Information Center carries the same warning. Merchant traffic has backed up outside the traffic separation scheme. Maritime security advisories have shifted from caution to active threat reporting. On the bridge, the officer of the deck keeps speed low enough for control, high enough for authority. Below, air defense operators watch the repeaters. Surface warfare controllers build a track picture of tankers, patrol craft, and unmanned contacts. No one speaks more than necessary. The operation is already underway when the cruisers arrive. They are entering to open water that global shipping cannot leave closed for long. The tactical background forms in layers. U.S. and coalition maritime commanders have spent days repositioning ships, aircraft, unmanned systems, and liaison networks around one of the world's most sensitive choke points. Recent security reporting describes merchant vessel harassment, diversion attempts, armed drone activity, and persistent navigation interference. Defense sources indicate that commercial masters have been instructed to answer coalition hails and rely on radar ranges and visual bearings when satellite navigation becomes unreliable. Analysts suggest the threat is designed less to sink every ship than to freeze shipping through uncertainty. That makes the Strait a battle space defined by procedure. The cruisers enter as command and control nodes, air defense umbrellas, and visible assurances that any mine-clearing effort will have a shield over it. 112. Behind them, the larger architecture comes into view. A destroyer screen spreads along the approaches. Maritime patrol aircraft orbit beyond the visible horizon. Rotary wing crews stand by for overwatch and recovery. Expeditionary teams prepare rigid hull boats and mine neutralization gear. Unmanned surface vessels begin moving into assigned sectors under remote control. Under the surface, sonar-equipped drones map the seabed contact by contact. The cruisers do not conduct the physical sweep themselves, but the operation cannot proceed without them. Their Aegis arrays keep the air picture coherent. Their communication suites connect fleet headquarters, tactical commanders, merchant liaison cells, and the ships that will eventually pass through the cleared lane. The first decisive signal arrives not as an explosion, but as a pattern. An unmanned underwater system running a deliberate search leg marks two bottom contacts positioned inside a merchant transit corridor where no legitimate objects should be. Minutes later, a second pass produces consistent returns with geometry that trained operators do not dismiss as discarded cargo. A nearby unmanned surface vessel towing a sensor package identifies another anomaly farther east, close enough to the bend in the traffic scheme to complicate evasive routing. In isolation, each contact could be clutter. In sequence, they form a line. The watch team aboard the lead cruiser stops treating the threat as theoretical. The tactical action officer orders the picture reclassified. The mine danger area expands on shared displays across the force. 228. Once the classification shifts, the pace remains calm but becomes exacting. Higher headquarters authorizes a deliberate clearance operation under protective escort. The cruisers advance to positions that give their radar and missile batteries the widest practical coverage over the strait. One ship assumes primary air defense command. The second takes surface action coordination and manages the recognized maritime picture for vessels stacked outside the choke point. The destroyers spread to intercept any fast surface movement approaching the clearance box. On encrypted circuits, task force staffs synchronize responsibilities that have been rehearsed for years and still feel heavy when the channel ahead may be seeded with live explosives. No part of the formation behaves like a charge. The movement is measured, doctrinal, and unmistakably offensive in its intent to retake freedom of navigation. Commercial shipping receives new routing guidance. Coalition liaison officers transmit holding instructions and explain that the reopening will proceed in serials, not as a mass release. Masters are told to maintain separation from naval units, monitor bridge-to-bridge frequencies, and prepare for sudden course restrictions. The lead cruiser's operations specialists correlate every civilian track with radar and voice reporting. Any vessel that deviates without explanation becomes a problem to solve immediately. Any small craft moving across the grain of traffic draws scrutiny. In the Strait, Order is survival. 344. The first major operational decision follows quickly. The task group commander chooses not to wait for a full end-to-end sweep of both lanes. Instead, the force will establish a single verified transit corridor wide enough for controlled passage, then expand it in phases. A full closure benefits the mining side. A reckless reopening benefits no one. So the cruisers anchor the compromise. They hold station far enough forward to deter interference, but not so far forward that they crowd the mine countermeasure units working below them. Their helicopters conduct visual reconnaissance along the edges of the clearance zone. Their electronic warfare teams monitor emitters ashore and afloat for signs of queuing activity. Every report is logged, cross-checked, and passed without embellishment. At the same time, the mine picture worsens. Additional sonar passes suggest mixed types of devices. Some contacts appear consistent with moored mines suspended in the water column. Others look more like bottom influence mines designed to react to the magnetic, acoustic, or pressure signatures of passing hulls. That distinction changes everything. Moored mines can sometimes be dealt with by mechanical or controlled methods once located. Influence mines demand patient classification, route management, and in many cases neutralization one object at a time. The cruiser's commanders understand the implication at once. The water may not be blocked by a dense field. It may be blocked by a small number of well-placed weapons that force the entire maritime system to slow down. 459. The second complication emerges from the environment rather than the enemy. Navigation interference intensifies across the approaches. Bridge teams on coalition ships report sporadic discrepancies between satellite-derived position and radar fixes. Merchant masters repeat earlier warnings. Bridges are seeing jumps in digital position data, and some are reverting to manual cross-checks. On the cruiser bridges, quartermasters and navigators shift visibly back toward traditional methods. Bearings, ranges, visual references, and charted checks regain priority. In confined waters, false precision is more dangerous than acknowledged uncertainty. The mine clearing plan now has to account not only for explosives in the water, but for the possibility that any ship using a corrupted position feed could stray toward the uncleared edge of the lane. Mine countermeasure teams answer by tightening geometry. Search boxes shrink. Marking points are confirmed by multiple methods. Remote vehicles are recovered, retasked, and sent out again to verify the same contact from a different angle. Explosive ordnance disposal operators review neutralization sequences on closed circuits, speaking in the clipped language of checklists and tolerances. The cruisers continue to provide the protective shell around that work. Their 5-inch guns remain trained within assigned sectors. Missile crews stay at readiness against any air or surface intrusion. Yet the dominant sound inside the ships is still not alarm. It is the low, continuous exchange of procedural voice traffic that keeps the battle space intelligible. 613. Then the third turning point appears on the screens. A surface contact group begins moving from the northern side of the strait toward the outer edge of the clearance area. The craft are small, numerous, and not yet openly hostile, but their track behavior suggests observation or possible disruption. At almost the same time, airborne sensors detect intermittent launches of small unmanned aircraft deeper inland, unconfirmed at this stage, with flight paths that could support surveillance. The cruisers do not overreact. Rules of engagement remain in force. Warnings are prepared. Intercept geometry is calculated. A destroyer shifts to challenge posture while the lead cruiser repositions slightly to keep the developing air and surface picture fused for the entire force. 727. The first neutralization sequence begins with almost no outward drama. An unmanned vehicle places charges near a confirmed contact in the western sector. Safety arcs are checked. Nearby boats clear the area. The cruiser bridge passes a brief advisory to all forces and then falls quiet again. Seconds later, a compact column of water rises, sharp but controlled, and collapses into spreading rings. No cheering follows. One mine destroyed does not mean the lane is safe. It means the estimate was correct, the method works, and the operation has crossed from preparation into execution. If one device sits here, others are likely aligned to exploit the same navigational pressure points. The task group commander orders the search extended eastward before the first convoy is released. This proves wise. Fresh contacts emerge near the channel constriction where deep draft traffic has the least room to improvise. One object appears partly buried in silt. Another sits close to a contour change that complicates sonar interpretation. The teams working the contacts have to distinguish explosives from debris while under the knowledge that hostile observers may be timing every pause. The cruisers maintain their barrier posture. One tracks airborne approaches. One manages surface contacts and civilian reporting. A destroyer holds ready to investigate any craft that closes beyond warning criteria. Overhead, maritime patrol support refreshes the broader picture, ensuring that the mine line is not being masked by a diversion elsewhere in the theater. 8:41. The crisis begins as a convergence of small pressures rather than a single dramatic event. A westbound tanker in the holding area reports limited maneuverability due to engineering issues. A separate merchant vessel requests clarification after receiving anomalous radio traffic from an unidentified caller. One of the unmanned search craft loses its primary link for several minutes and shifts to contingency behavior. At the same time, another cluster of small surface contacts edges closer to the outer perimeter of the clearance box. None of these developments alone justifies a break in the mission. Together, they strain the margin that deliberate operations depend on. Inside the cruiser CIC, display tables are crowded not with panic, but with competing priorities. The task group commander now faces the peak decision: suspend the clearance and preserve forces until the surface picture simplifies, or continue the push while the corridor still remains partially organized. Delay carries strategic cost. Every extra hour multiplies pressure on shipping schedules, energy markets, and allied confidence. Continuing carries tactical risk. The commander chooses a controlled advance. The lead cruiser moves farther into the Strait to tighten protective coverage over the neutralization teams. The second cruiser shifts slightly aft to maintain a wider command picture and preserve missile geometry. The destroyers adjust in response, building a layered screen around a mine warfare operation that is still proceeding one cautious contact at a time. 9:56. From that point, the operation becomes a test of discipline. The damaged merchant ship is stabilized in holding position under coalition monitoring. The false radio calls are logged and ignored. Backup control is re-established with the unmanned craft. Search teams continue their passes. A second mine is neutralized, then a third. A fourth contact is downgraded after additional imaging reveals non-threatening debris. That matters. In high-tension water, misclassification can paralyze a force as effectively as enemy action. The cruiser's staffs insist on verification before each detonation. The minefield, if that is what it is, must be reduced methodically, not theatrically. The channel is being reopened for tankers carrying strategic cargo, but also for the idea that professional navies can impose order without losing control of their own tempo. Hours into the mission, the first verified corridor begins to take shape. It is narrow, heavily managed, and still bounded by uncleared water on either side, but it is real. Coalition navigators publish precise track guidance. Merchant liaison cells begin sorting priority transits based on draft, maneuverability, and convoy timing. The cruisers hold their stations like fixed references in a landscape of uncertainty. To civilian bridges waiting outside the lane, their presence means someone is finally drawing a line through the disorder. To the mine warfare teams, it means their slow work has a shield around it. To hostile observers, it signals that the reopening will not be bargained by intimidation. 11:10. The controlled resolution does not look like victory in the cinematic sense. There is no broadside, no collapsing skyline, no triumphant formation steaming at flank speed. Instead, the first escorted merchant movement proceeds under explicit instructions and constant reporting. Speed is controlled. Helm orders are conservative. Distances are maintained. Coalition ships monitor every segment of the passage. The lead cruiser keeps the air defense umbrella forward. The second cruiser coordinates the surface picture astern. A destroyer shadows the convoy's exposed flank. Unmanned systems continue searching beyond the lane even as the first commercial hull enters it. Reopening the strait is not a single event. It is a sequence of permissions earned by verified clearance. More contacts are still being investigated. Defense sources report that additional devices may have been laid outside the initial danger area, though the pattern remains unconfirmed at this stage. Analysts suggest the mining effort aims not only to threaten shipping, but to force an expensive and time-consuming Western response. If so, the answer now taking shape is equally deliberate. The coalition does not need to make every square mile safe at once. It needs to make the critical corridor usable, defend the teams expanding it, and demonstrate that sea control can be rebuilt faster than disruption can be imposed. The cruisers are central to that message. They represent staying power, sensor reach, and escalation management in a battle space designed to fray nerves. 1226. By late in the cycle, procedural routines start to reassert themselves. Watch sections rotate. Logs are updated. Sonar imagery is archived and compared against earlier passes. Fuel states, ammunition readiness, and helicopter deck windows are recalculated for the next phase. That rhythm shows the force remains in command of itself. In prolonged maritime operations, composure is logistics expressed as behavior. The cruisers' crews know they may be here longer than the first headline cycle. Mine warfare does not reward impatience. Every clearance creates a new requirement to guard, verify, and sustain the route that has been opened. 1340. Historically, choke points have always magnified the value of patience. In wide oceans, navies maneuver for advantage across distance. In narrow seas, procedure becomes strategy. Every radar return, every VHF call, every sonar image, every plotted fix against a headland or buoy can alter the margin between transit and disaster. That is why this operation matters beyond the immediate lane now reopening. It demonstrates that mine warfare remains one of the most effective forms of maritime denial, and that defeating it still depends on crews willing to do slow, exacting work under the protection of larger combatants. The cruisers do not solve the mine threat alone, but without them the specialists below their umbrella would work exposed. As darkness approaches again, the strait is not fully clear, only partially reclaimed. Additional lanes remain under investigation. Unconfirmed reporting continues to circulate about more devices, more small craft, and more attempts to exploit the confusion of heavy traffic. The coalition response remains unchanged: verify, isolate, neutralize, escort, repeat. That repetition is the point. Professional sea power answers disruption through disciplined routine until uncertainty loses its leverage. The cruisers remain on station, their radars turning, their combat systems fed by a constant stream of aircraft tracks, surface plots, and mine warfare updates. Around them, the task force continues the patient work of making a threatened waterway navigable again. 1456. What this event means operationally is straightforward. Even in an era of drones, satellites, and long-range precision weapons, the simplest naval obstacle can still force a major fleet into close, deliberate labor. What it means strategically is larger. Any actor seeking to pressure the West through maritime choke points is counting on hesitation, confusion, and economic fear to do more work than the weapon itself. In the Strait of Hormuz, the answer taking shape is not theatrical retaliation. It is a protected clearance operation led by cruisers, sustained by destroyers, informed by unmanned systems, and translated into confidence for civilian shipping one verified mile at a time. By the end of the watch, the first corridor is functioning under escort and expansion work is continuing. That is enough to alter the strategic picture. Markets respond to reliability before they respond to rhetoric. Merchant masters respond to safe routing before they respond to promises. Allied governments respond to demonstrated procedure before they respond to declarations. In that sense, the cruisers have achieved the essential effect. They have helped convert a mined approach from a symbol of paralysis into a managed problem. The strait is still dangerous. The operation is still incomplete. But the initiative now rests with the force that can keep working through the night. 1608. Stay with the next watch, because sea control is one confirmed contact at a time through the dark water ahead.